In 1921, there was a place in America that proved beyond any doubt what Black Americans could achieve when given the opportunity to build and thrive in peace. It was called the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but the rest of the country knew it by another name, Black Wall Street, and the name was entirely deserved. Greenwood was the most prosperous African American community in the entire United States. It had its own banks, its own hotels, its own theaters and hospitals and law firms and newspapers, its own schools and churches and grocery stores and beauty salons. Over 10,000 Black Americans lived and worked and thrived in Greenwood, building businesses, raising families, creating wealth, creating a future. It was living proof that with opportunity and freedom Black Americans could build something extraordinary, and that proof made certain people very uncomfortable. The residents of Greenwood had built their community from almost nothing. After the Civil War and the end of slavery, Black Americans in Oklahoma had faced enormous obstacles, discrimination, violence, legal barriers designed to keep them poor and powerless. But the people of Greenwood had refused to be held back. They had pooled their resources, supported each other's businesses, kept their money circulating within their own community. A dollar spent in Greenwood was said to change hands 19 times before it ever left the neighborhood. Compare that to one time in most communities today. The doctors and lawyers and business owners of Greenwood were educated, sophisticated, successful people who had fought for everything they had. They were proud of what they had built. They had every right to be. And on the night of May 31st, 1921, everything they had built was about to be taken from them in the most brutal and deliberate way imaginable. It started with a lie. On May 30th, 1921, a 19-year-old black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland entered an elevator in a downtown Tulsa office building. The elevator was operated by a 17-year-old white girl named Sarah Page. Exactly what happened in that elevator has never been established with certainty. Dick Rowland may have stumbled and accidentally grabbed Sarah Page's arm to steady himself. Sarah Page may have simply been startled. Whatever actually happened, it was over in seconds and entirely insignificant. But the next morning, a Tulsa newspaper ran a story with the headline "Nab Negro for Attacking Girl in Elevator." The story was almost entirely fabricated, but it did not matter. The damage was done. Within hours, the streets of Tulsa were filled with armed white men calling for Dick Rowland's lynching, and the spark that would burn Black Wall Street to the ground had been lit. As night fell on May 31st, 1921, an armed white mob gathered outside the Tulsa courthouse where Dick Rowland was being held. They demanded he be handed over to them. A group of Black Tulsans, many of them World War I veterans who had fought for their country, arrived at the courthouse armed and offered to help protect Dick Rowland. Shots were fired. Nobody knows who fired first, but those shots were all the excuse the mob needed. What followed was not a riot. Let that word be clear. What happened in Tulsa on the night of May 31st and the morning of June 1st, 1921 was not a riot. It was a massacre. A coordinated, deliberate attack by a white mob on an entire Black community. And it had the support of the local government and law enforcement who did nothing to stop it, and in some cases actively participated. Through the night of May 31st and into the morning of June 1st, the mob invaded Greenwood. They came on foot, in cars. Some accounts report that airplanes flew over the neighborhood, firing on residents and dropping incendiary devices onto buildings below. The mob looted homes and businesses before setting them on fire. They shot Black residents in the streets. They prevented firefighters from responding to the blazes. Building after building went up in flames. Churches, schools, hospitals, hotels, the offices of the Tulsa Star newspaper, the law firms and medical practices that had taken decades to build, all of it burning, all of it gone. Black residents fled their homes with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Some were shot as they ran. Others hid wherever they could find shelter. By the time the sun rose on June 1st, 1921, Black Wall Street was gone, reduced to ash and rubble in a single night. The scale of the destruction was almost beyond comprehension. 35 square blocks of the Greenwood district had been completely destroyed. Over 1,200 homes burned to the ground. Every single business in the district looted and destroyed. The Greenwood district's 2 newspapers, its hotels, its schools, its churches, its hospital, all gone. The estimated property damage in today's money runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The official death toll was recorded as 39 people, but historians and researchers who have studied the massacre believe the true number of Black Tulsans killed was anywhere between 100 and 300 people. Bodies were reportedly buried in mass graves, thrown into the Arkansas River, hidden in the ruins of burned buildings. The true death toll, like so much else about this event, was deliberately suppressed. In the aftermath of the massacre, over 10,000 Black Tulsans were left homeless. They were rounded up by law enforcement and held in detention camps around the city. Internment camps, in America, for the victims of the attack, not the perpetrators, the victims. While the people who had burned their homes and killed their neighbors walked free, the survivors of the Greenwood Massacre were held under armed guard in makeshift camps. Many lost everything they had ever owned: their homes, their businesses, their savings, their life's work, gone overnight. And when they tried to rebuild, the city of Tulsa imposed new fire ordinances specifically designed to prevent Black residents from rebuilding in Greenwood. The attack did not end with the fires. It continued through law and policy for decades afterward. What happened next is almost as disturbing as the massacre itself. The authorities covered it up. Official records were destroyed or hidden. Investigations were quietly dropped. Not a single person was ever charged or prosecuted for the murders. Not one. For the looting. Not one. For the destruction of an entire community. Not one. Insurance claims filed by Black Tulsans whose homes and businesses had been destroyed were denied on the grounds that the damage had been caused by a riot. The word riot was used deliberately, because riot damage was not covered by insurance. The word massacre, which is what it actually was, would have required compensation. So riot it was called. And in the years that followed, the Tulsa Race Massacre was systematically removed from history, from school textbooks, from official records, from public memory. An entire community destroyed, and then erased. For decades, the Tulsa Race Massacre was one of America's most successfully buried secrets. People who had lived through it were afraid to speak about it. Their children grew up knowing something terrible had happened, but not knowing the full truth. White Tulsans who had participated in or witnessed the massacre simply did not talk about it. It was not taught in Oklahoma schools. It was not mentioned in history textbooks. National newspapers that had covered the massacre in 1921 seemed to collectively forget it had ever happened. An entire generation of Americans grew up with no knowledge that one of the wealthiest Black communities in American history had been deliberately destroyed in a single night. It was not until the 1990s that Oklahoma finally commissioned an official investigation into the massacre, and not until 2001 that a full official report was published. 80 years after the event, 80 years of silence. Today, the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is being rebuilt. A new generation of Black entrepreneurs and community leaders are working to restore what was taken. A memorial center now stands near the site of the massacre. The names of the known victims are being recorded and honored. In 2021, on the 100th anniversary of the massacre, the three known living survivors: Viola Fletcher, aged 107, Hughes Van Ellis, aged 102, and Leslie Benningfield Randall, aged 108, testified before the United States Congress. They asked for recognition, for accountability, for reparations. They were still waiting, but they were not silent, and neither should we be, because Black Wall Street was not just a place. It was proof of what is possible when people are free to build and create and thrive. And what was done to it was not just a crime against the people of Greenwood. It was a crime against the very idea of America itself.